Welcome, folks, to the Inner Circle call here, where we've always are excited to turn chaos into clarity and help entrepreneurs build companies that run on systems, not on stress, right? And so today we're talking about resilient systems that scale, and I'm not talking about resilience in pushing harder or grinding more, but resilience in addressing your operations, your people, your communication, your cash flow, your leadership, and in a way that can take a hit and keep on moving. So like I said a bit earlier, take that punch and keep flowing. Now I want to clarify something on my screen here, or my background I should say. I have grind, right? I have grind, and that's a motivator for me because it helps me, remind me that how to be resilient, how to keep moving. But I want to just touch on this because grind here on the verb, it says to perform repetitive tasks over and over in order to attain a goal. So it speaks to being consistent in your grind, not grind harder, but to be consistent, to be disciplined. And that's what this systems is going to talk to us about as we move forward. All right. So if you've ever felt like you're one bad week, one resignation, one emergency, one cash flow, one parental leave, from sort of buckling you, we're going to talk about how to build a business that is punch proof, a business that really does not break when the pressure shows up, but instead it shows you exactly how strong your systems really are. So let's get into it. All right, so how to punch proof your business. Well, one simple question that I'd ask is for every one of us here on the call to take away is ask yourself, what breaks first when something goes wrong? For most businesses, the breaking point is pretty predictable. It's usually one key person holding all the knowledge, right? Or the owner being involved in every decision, or the process only exists in someone's head, or communication falling apart under pressure, and volume increasing and operation buckling. So, like let's give you a fresh example of one organization that I worked with. There was a boutique construction company in Kelowna, was doing about 3 to 4 million a year with great reputation and happy clients. But the business was completely dependent on the owner. So this sounds probably a little familiar to what some of you are going through. When he tried taking a 10-day vacation, everything stalled. The trades didn't go as scheduled. The quotes piled up unanswered. The customer updates stopped, and the job site slowed down. Nothing was working. So we dialed it back and we said, well, what's wrong here? And so what we noticed is nothing was wrong with the product. It was just simply that the system was super fragile. So what we did is we installed a morning coordination call, a customer update standard SOP, a quoting SOP, and a weekly job planning rhythm for the site leads. The next summer, the owner took off a full month and the business ran better without him. But what we did is we transferred responsibility from the owner to the leads by giving them the tools and the framework in which they then were accountable to making decisions and empowered to making decisions to move that business and continue to flow without that one owner, right? So that's what punch proofing looks like at a grand scale, at a high scale. Now, let's talk about stress testing your operations and leadership. Because as leaders, we shouldn't wait for a crisis. If you're waiting for that crisis, it's already too late. You're already getting punched. You've already been shot, right? So what we call a stress test is almost like a fire drill. Run them in advance before the crisis. Stress testing forces you to look at your business through the lens of pressure and not comfort. So ask yourself these questions. Again, what breaks if volume jumps 30 to 40% tomorrow? What collapses if 2 of your best people quit today? What happens if your top supplier misses 2 weeks? Right? All of these are very important for us to fire drill and be ahead of them. What's your response flow if some of this stuff happens? What are your weakest points? Okay? And so when we ask these questions, it exposes the truth. And one of the examples I can give you that I go into every winter, I say, all right, I know that we have winter spikes that come in my industry. And so we carry, 5% extra overhead to allow us to uptake that spike. Well, of recent, that 5% has become 8 and closer to 10% because we're seeing some of the volume peaks a little bit sooner, and now we're preparing for the stuff that's going to go wrong in anticipation, right? And so, we plan ahead for those things to happen. And one of the things we go into every weekend and we say, okay, guys, in every zone, what happens if you on, like, let's just say on average we have 3 breakdowns of units a weekend. What happens if 8 trucks break down? What loads do you have to divert? Who gets impacted? Who gets missed? Who gets rescheduled? Who are your outlets? Who do you bring in from an outside carrier perspective? All of these questions are starting to be asked as early as Wednesday to prepare our leads for the weekend. So when the actual events happen, our leads already know the game plan. And this we institute in our daily huddle that happens at 11 o'clock every single day. So as business owners, I would do something similar. Hey guys, it's the weekend. What happens if one of our service techs calls in sick? Who's got the playbook? Who's running point on this weekend, right? What happens if we get 3 extra calls, more than our normal volume? What do we do? How do we reschedule them? How do we plan them? How do we ensure we don't miss out on sales, right? So these are sort of the things that we sort of put together. Now I'm going to give you another live example. Is working with this dental clinic in Calgary, and they wanted a second location, right? But before scaling, we ran a stress test. We looked at where was the information coming from and who was housing all the source of truth. And what we found was the lead hygienist was the key component. If that person was away, the entire schedule broke. So, if the office manager was away, payroll stopped, 2 assistants were gone, patients, everything collapsed. So there was no way this organization could scale, not because the business was bad or wasn't ready to scale, is because it was too fragile. It had built everything on 1 to 2 people, and that was it. So we corrected it by implementing cross training. The daily huddles helped, and then we put in together scheduling processes. All of this with a dashboard that everybody could understand. And 6 months later, they opened their second location smoothly, profitably, and without any chaos. But we did this because we stress tested it in advance. We knew where the gaps were in our business. And so that's super key, because a lot of people believe that if it's not broken, don't fix it. Don't talk about it. I actually like to flip the script on this. And I like to talk about, let's assume it's broken. Let's expose what is not working, even though it's working today. Because what that does is that it reinforces like some aspect of redundancy and what I like to call discipline, right? So this redundancy and discipline in cash, people, and process all ultimately give us that output that we're looking to have when things go wrong. So cash redundancy is the first place that resilience shows up. A resilient business has a 13-week cash flow forecast. It reserves for one of those 3 months of fixed costs. It's got tiered pricing. It has predictable seasonality plans and deposits or prepayments to predict cash flow. So if you predict your cash flow activity for 13 weeks, you'll know your revenue for 13 weeks, so you can predict it, and you know all your expenses for 13 weeks out. You could see where your gaps will be if something breaks. Let's say a client, you get a big job, big construction job, and you get the materials, you get crews going, but your client doesn't pay on time. Well, now you'll know at which point in that 13-week cycle you're going to be cash flow strapped. And you can start planning ahead on how to pivot, right? And so those are the type of things that I like to talk about when it comes to cash flow. I had this one gym owner in Vancouver that struggled every fall, right? Because what happens is you have a downturn right after the summer, and people just kind of slow down. They don't renew. So cash was tightening. So we introduced again pre-sold memberships. We did some holiday bundles and some other small group trainings and vendor negotiations. But the 13-week cash flow plan was critical because again, 3 months later, he had the foresight to understand where sort of the dips were going to be. And so this cash redundancy and cash discipline allowed us to see it. The next redundancy point that I like to point out is the people redundancy. This, if your business depends heavily on one superstar, one manager, one dispatcher, or one business owner, then my friends, you're exposed completely. You need cross training. You need documented SOPs, and you need a real succession plan. So what do I mean by this? Let me give you an example. We have folks in our business that operate in specific zones, whether that's Southern Alberta, Northern Alberta, or British Columbia, and they work in those seats. But we cross-train them so that they can cover for other seats in other zones in case someone is sick, someone goes on vacations. Then we have the ability to cover those tasks and those requirements without needing to add more people and without the system bucking, right? Now, another aspect that I like in cross-training, it was an example that I used when I was managing an import cross dock in Vancouver many moons ago. And so we were managing nearly 150,000 containers, ocean freight containers from the Vancouver ports for the Retailers Association of Canada. We had like Home Depot, we had the Canadian Tire movement, and so we had these coordinators. They were specific seats. One of them was an import coordinator, one of them was an export coordinator, and the other one was dedicated accounts to large retailers. And every year, I would rotate the seats. So if you were the import coordinator this year, 2025, next year I would move you to export seat. And then I would move you to the other one. And so every year we had someone cross-training into another seat. And what it actually did was it expanded our knowledge, but it also created new processes when that person came into that seat. Because otherwise, what I found was people just get really comfortable in their role. And because they get really comfortable, they never really grow. And so we're never really able to expand that role by placing somebody new into the seat. It actually allowed us to have the opportunity to review like tasks that weren't needed, remove those, add new ones, add new stuff. And that person then made it theirs again. And it just continued to flow that way so that it allowed us to always be ahead of it. So that was the people redundancy, and something that I found to be super important. And that also ties into the next redundancy, which is our process redundancy. So if something only works when one person does it, it isn't a process, it's a risk, right? And so like that was my example of process redundancy, is have someone come in and change it up. Like, let's make sure we unpack it. Let's see what is broken that we could fix by cross training and having somebody pop in every single time. It lets us uncover these things. Now, the next crisis that I think it's important for us to talk through when we are discussing building a resilient business is communication standards. When something goes wrong, silence is the enemy, right? Panic is the amplifier. And so a resilient business uses 6 steps in crisis communication. I would like to start with, first, we put a communication system in place. Then we acknowledge what the issue is. We protect the people and the site. We notify our leadership, and we communicate confirmed facts, right? So what we need to do is ultimately have a game plan in communication. Think of it again as a fire drill, right? When you have a fire drill at your office, your fire drill in your building, okay, who's the marshal, who's taking care of rounding out the troops, who's doing the lab check to make sure the building or the office is empty, and then where's the muster point, who is, doing head count at the muster point, and who's communicating with the authorities or the emergency response people, right? All those things have to be put into place. And this is what that communication crisis standards needs to be played out and put in place in your business. Acknowledge there's an issue, protect it. So, protect the people, protect the site, protect what's going on, the integrity of what's happening, notify your key leadership, stay fact true only, and update throughout the day. This is important. I've seen this in my line of work where we have various accidents, some of them very serious accidents. And so everybody wants to know, is the people okay? Is the site okay? And so having this communication standards in place in your business, especially for you field businesses, is very important. It allows peace of mind, and it allows for everybody to have controlled communication. So it's not chaotic. Not everybody's flipping out and scared and sort of lost, but it gives them structure. All right. And I think, like Tyler, I know that you were part military, so this will probably be a bit related, it'll tie back to your previous experience. And so, like, this was key for me to touch into today, to making sure that everybody here heard about crisis communication and putting this together in your businesses to allow you to take on those emergencies. Now, the next component that is important for us to talk about is emotional resilience and decision clarity. Okay. When the pressure rises, most leaders slip into emotional decision making, and that generally leads to urgency, number one, then anger, micromanagement, or withdrawal or blame. All of them are emotions that happen because of something that goes unplanned. Okay. Like I said earlier, someone comes in, quits on you. Oh, that one hurts. That's an emotional punch, right? And now how do you react? What happens next? How do you deal with it? So it's key that emotionally resilient leaders use a simple algorithm, something that's in place that allows you to really pause, look at the data, remove the ego, and ask what the business needs now. Then make a decision and communicate simply. I like to talk about one specific example that I had to deal with one of the folks that I work with. He was a restaurant owner in Montreal. This is a true story. Friday night, okay, comes in, and his entire staff walks out on him because of a labor dispute that they had. Okay, so no servers, no host, and a full dining room. It's a Friday night. It's a Friday night in Montreal, right? It's a busy night. People want to go out for dinner. So instead of panicking, he stabilized the environment. He simplified the menu. He's like, all right, we're not going to do all this. We're going to stick to what we can do. Put a plan in place. He comped some meals for those that were taking a long time. He closed walk-ins after everybody was already seated, and he brought in cooks to support the floor. He stayed calm under the situation and handled the business that night. But he had a playbook. He maintained that sort of emotional intelligence under crisis and knew what his outlets needed to be. He'd planned ahead, and he said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to go do those items on the menu that take up time, that require a lot. I'm going to simplify it, scale it down to what we can serve. We're going to maintain our customer experience by comping some of these people that are here. And I'm going to bring people from the kitchen to help me run the floor. And we're going to make it through the night. When the night was over, after the crisis, he rebuilt again, right? He started all over. And within a few months, he had hired the right people. He had brought in the right processes, and his revenue continued to be an all-time high. But that was because he recognized the emotional resilience that he needed to have, and that incident taught him, and it prepared him on what to do when these crises happen. So, today, what I want to share with everybody and leave everybody with is a resilient business doesn't come from motivation. It really doesn't. It comes from structure. Your daily huddles, your weekly scorecard reviews, your one-with-ones, and having a crisis playbook in your business will allow and will ensure that your business doesn't break under pressure. When you build resilience into your people, your process, your cash, and your communication, your business stops depending on you. And it actually allows, the folks around you to really step up and become part of that solution. So when you think about scaling, and ensuring that you're ready for scaling, you want to make sure that you have a resilient system and an emergency plan and pivot outlets as part of your culture so that you're not punched and buckled. You could take the punches, you can take the pivots, and you can make those changes on the go. And this allows your business to stay healthy. It allows your culture to stay, healthy with all of this because it becomes part of the expectation. All right. So again, this is in conclusion, and we look forward to having your questions and jumping right into the hot topics.